When I slipped that gold bracelet onto my wrist, I knew exactly what I was doing. It wasn't just jewelry, it was evidence, a silent confession he didn't know I'd already read. And that night, when we sat at dinner, across from her, I made sure the light hit it just right. When I slipped that gold bracelet onto my wrist, I knew exactly what I was doing. But before that moment, before the silence, before the dinner, there was me, the version of me who still believed in him, the woman who thought love could protect her from betrayal. I used to believe I had everything: a stable marriage, a husband who made good money, a home in Buckhead that looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine, cream-colored walls, framed wedding photos, perfectly arranged flowers that I replaced every Sunday. To everyone else, we were that couple, the ones people admired at dinner parties, the ones friends called relationship goals. His name was Michael, my husband of 7 years. He was the kind of man who spoke softly but carried confidence in his walk. He had that CEO charm, firm handshake, perfect suit, cologne that lingered long after he left a room. And me? I was Lauren James, 34, a brand consultant who built other people's images for a living. I could sell elegance, polish a name, reframe a story. But the irony was, I couldn't see the cracks in my own. Every morning, I'd wake up to the smell of his coffee. He always made 2 cups, one for him, one for me. He'd kiss me on the forehead and say, "Don't work too hard today, baby." And I'd smile, because moments like that felt like proof. But now, looking back, I realize routine is the easiest disguise for distance. We weren't fighting. We weren't even talking less. We were just existing beside each other. Love had become like furniture, comfortable, familiar, but untouched. That morning, the day everything changed, was like any other. I was running late for a client meeting. My car keys were nowhere to be found, so I grabbed Michael's. His car was parked right behind mine anyway. He'd left early, as usual. Said he had an early meeting downtown. So I rushed out, wearing a beige coat, my hair still damp from the shower, coffee in hand, heels clicking on the driveway. The Atlanta air was crisp, the kind that makes your breath visible, I remember, because I saw it fog up as I whispered to myself, "God, I hope traffic isn't bad today." If I knew what I was about to find, I probably wouldn't have even turned that ignition key. His car smelled like him: expensive cologne, faint leather, a trace of mint gum. I smiled, thinking about how he always kept things so clean. He was meticulous about details, every receipt filed, every shirt ironed, every appointment synced to his phone. I reached into the glove compartment to grab my lip balm. Mine was usually there from the last time I borrowed his car. But instead, a small velvet pouch slid out. At first, I didn't even think twice. I assumed it was something from a client, maybe a gift, maybe something he was holding for someone. But curiosity is a dangerous thing when your heart still trusts. I opened it. Inside, a gold bracelet. Thin, delicate, the kind you'd wear on special occasions. It caught the light, soft and expensive. I smiled. For half a second, I thought, "Oh, he bought me something." Until I saw it. Engraved on the inside, M and A. My name starts with an L. Lauren. The smile disappeared before I even realized it. My heart stuttered, like it had skipped a beat, but not in the romantic way. I stared at those letters, M and A, as if they could rearrange themselves into something innocent. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it stood for Michael and always. Maybe. No. I knew his handwriting. I knew the way he thought. Michael was too precise to buy something with the wrong initials. And that's when the denial cracked. And the first thought I had wasn't, who is she? It was, how long? I remember gripping the steering wheel, my hands trembling. I didn't cry. Not yet. Tears come when your body catches up to your heart, and mine was still in shock. I drove to my meeting in silence, the bracelet burning in my lap like a secret I didn't ask to keep. I smiled, shook hands, presented slides, made jokes. I did everything I was supposed to do. Because when you're a woman who's been betrayed, you learn fast appearances are your armor. That night, when he came home, he kissed me like nothing was wrong. He talked about his day, about how his team hit their sales goals. I listened. And then I asked, casually, "Hey, did you leave something in the car?" He looked up, half distracted. "What do you mean? Just a pouch or something?" He froze not for long, just a second. But when you love someone, you notice the pauses. He smiled too quickly. "Oh, that? A client gift for someone's wife. I was supposed to drop it off. Forgot." He lied with steady eyes, and I smiled with steady hands. That's when I decided I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. Because confrontation gives them control. But silence gives you time. That night, after he fell asleep, I held the bracelet again. Under the bedside lamp, it shimmered beautiful and cruel. I thought about the woman whose name started with A. What did she look like? Did she laugh at his jokes? Did he text her from our couch? I didn't know her yet, but I knew one thing, that bracelet wasn't leaving my sight. They say heartbreak breaks you open, but for me, it didn't break, it sharpened. That was the night Lauren, the wife, the believer, the forgiving woman began to fade, and someone else started to take her place. Someone quieter, more dangerous, and fully awake. People think betrayal feels like an explosion, loud, violent, shattering. But that's not true. Real betrayal feels quiet. It slips into your life like a whisper and sits next to you at dinner. The bracelet didn't leave my mind. For days, it haunted every thought, every breath. It was tucked deep inside my dresser drawer, hidden under folded sweaters. But I could feel it there, like it was pulsing, like it was alive. The initials burned behind my eyes, M and A. I'd replay that moment over and over me opening the glove compartment, the way my hand froze, the weight of that velvet pouch, the softness of the fabric against my fingers. That was the moment my life split in two, before and after. And after, nothing felt real anymore. Michael didn't notice the change. He was busy, always was. He left early, came home late. His phone always faced down on the table. His laptop screen closed when I walked by. He still kissed me goodbye every morning, still smiled like a man who had nothing to hide. And that made me angrier than the bracelet itself, how comfortable he was in his lie. Like he'd done it long enough to make it look like love. At work, I tried to keep my focus. I'd stare at my clients' logos, brand strategies, color palettes, all the tools I used to make people look authentic. And I'd laugh to myself, because that's what he was doing, rebranding his truth. Michael, the devoted husband, the charming professional, had built an image, and I'd helped him sell it to the world. And that realization hurt. Not just because he cheated, but because I'd built the mask he was wearing to do it. 3 nights later, we went out for dinner. It was spontaneous, his idea. He said, "We haven't had a night out in a while. Let's do something nice." I said yes. Because I wanted to watch him. I wanted to see if guilt showed up on his face when he looked at me across a candlelit table. He picked a new Italian place downtown, the kind with dim lights, white tablecloths, a jazz trio playing something soft. He ordered wine, my favorite, or at least what used to be my favorite. When the waiter left, he smiled at me. "You've been quiet lately," he said. I smiled back. "Just busy. Work's been crazy." He reached across the table, touched my hand, and said, "I miss us." And for a second, I almost believed him. Because that's the cruelty of betrayal. It doesn't erase love right away. It lets it linger, just long enough to hurt you twice. That night, when we drove home, he asked if I wanted to take his car in the morning. He said he'd be out early again. I said sure. And the moment he left the next day, I went back to that glove compartment. The velvet pouch was gone. He'd moved it, hidden it, or worse, given it away. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my pulse pounding in my ears. I started searching under the seats, between the cushions, even the trunk. Nothing. But then, something else caught my eye. A receipt, folded neatly in the cup holder, barely visible. It was from a jewelry store. Same week, same initials. Engraving M&A. Price $1,200. And next to it, the signature. His. That was my proof. No guessing, no imagining. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a transaction, a planned, deliberate gift for someone else. I sat there in his car for almost an hour, just staring out the windshield. The world outside looked normal: kids on bikes, mail trucks, dogs barking. Meanwhile, my reality was quietly collapsing inside a luxury sedan. I didn't scream, didn't throw things, didn't call him. Instead, I whispered, "Okay, just that, okay." Because what do you say when the person you trusted with your life betrays you so neatly? You don't explode, you calculate. That night, I made dinner, roasted salmon, salad, wine, everything perfect. Because when you're planning your next move, the last thing you do is give away that you're planning. When he came home, he kissed me on the cheek. "You made dinner?" he said, surprised. "Yeah." I smiled. "Felt like cooking." End quote. We sat, we ate, we talked about everything except the truth. He told me about his meetings, his deadlines, how tired he was, and I kept nodding, pouring him more wine, watching his eyes for even a flicker of guilt. Nothing. He was smooth. And that's when I realized something terrifying. He wasn't new to this. He was experienced. That night, after he fell asleep, I opened his phone. I knew the passcode, his birth year. He trusted me too much. And that's when I saw her. Ava. Messages. Photos. Not explicit, he was smarter than that. But the kind of messages that didn't need to be. The ones with emotion tucked between casual lines. "You looked beautiful yesterday. I miss our talks. Same place Friday?" And her replies, short but warm, familiar. I scrolled until I couldn't breathe, until my reflection blurred on the phone screen through tears I didn't remember starting. Then I saw the one that ended it, the one sent a week ago. "I love the bracelet. It's perfect." That's when I locked the phone, placed it back gently on the nightstand, and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't broken. I wasn't even sad. I was awake. The next morning, he asked me if I was okay. "You look tired," he said. I smiled. Didn't sleep well. He kissed my forehead, said, "Try to rest," and walked out the door. As soon as I heard the car pull away, I got up, went to the drawer, and pulled out my jewelry box. Inside, I placed something new, a plan. Because if Ava wanted the bracelet, she could have it. But not without seeing it on my wrist first. That was the moment the idea was born. Not revenge yet, not exactly. Something colder, sharper, controlled. It wasn't about screaming or exposing him right away. It was about reclaiming power in the quietest way possible. I wasn't the kind of woman who threw things or begged for answers. No, I was the kind who learned to weaponize grace. And if he wanted to live a double life, then I'd show him what it feels like when the two worlds collide slowly, beautifully, and publicly. So when he told me about the dinner invitation 2 days later, a few friends, nothing fancy, he said, I smiled because I already knew she'd be there. And when I walked into that dinner wearing a black dress and her bracelet, that would be my quiet explosion. They say revenge is best served cold, but mine? It was gold, and it shimmered under the light just enough for both of them to see it. When a man lies to you long enough, you stop hearing his words and start studying his pauses. Every breath, every shift in tone, every I love you that feels just half a second too late. Night before the dinner, I stood in front of my closet for what felt like an hour. Not because I didn't know what to wear, but because I knew this outfit wasn't about fashion. It was strategy. Michael said the dinner was casual, just a few colleagues from work, some spouses, maybe a bottle or two of wine. But I knew exactly what it was. An opportunity. Because when a man is unfaithful, he gets sloppy. He starts to believe in his own lies. And when he invites you into his second world, the one he's been hiding, that's not carelessness. That's arrogance. He thought I didn't know. He thought I'd show up smiling, naive, proud to be the wife. But what he didn't know was that I had already decided how the evening would end. The bracelet lay on my dresser, still shining, still cruel. It wasn't mine, but that night, it would be. I ran my fingers over the engraving M and A and smiled. There was something poetic about it. He'd given her a symbol of their love, and I was about to turn it into evidence. I wore a black silk dress, simple, elegant, nothing loud. The kind of dress that whispered class, not revenge. I curled my hair loosely, the way he used to say he liked it. Then, I slipped the bracelet on my wrist and watched it catch the light. It was almost beautiful, how betrayal can look like luxury. When Michael came out of the bedroom, his eyes paused just a second, and he smiled. "Wow," he said softly. "You look stunning." I smiled back. "Thank you. So do you." He didn't notice the bracelet. Not yet. Or maybe he did, but didn't let himself notice. That's the thing about guilt. Sometimes denial feels safer than confession. The drive to the dinner was quiet. He talked about work, traffic, nothing important. I looked out the window, pretending to listen. My heart steady, not racing, not trembling, just calm. Because this wasn't anger anymore. It was precision. When we pulled up to the house, a large, modern place in the suburbs, I recognized the name on the mailbox. Carter, one of his colleagues. I had a feeling Ava would be inside. The door opened before we could even knock. Laughter spilled out, the warm, easy kind that fills spaces where people feel too comfortable. Inside, everything smelled like expensive candles and red wine. I smiled politely as people greeted us. Everyone seemed so familiar with Michael. Too familiar, especially her. And there she was. Ava, she wasn't what I expected. Not the dramatic type, not a cliché. She was pretty, yes, but in a soft, effortless way. Blonde hair tied back, minimal makeup, a silk top, confidence in her posture. The kind of woman who looked like she'd never had to ask for attention, it just followed her. When our eyes met, she smiled. A perfect, polite smile. And I smiled back, because that's what women do when they recognize each other's secrets but can't say them out loud. Michael introduced me. "This is my wife, Lauren." Ava's lips curved slightly. "Oh, finally! I've heard so much about you." Her tone was warm. Too warm. And that's when I knew she already knew who I was. Maybe not at first, but eventually. I extended my hand. "It's nice to meet you, Ava." Our fingers touched. Her eyes flicked just for a second to my wrist, and I saw it. The flicker, the flash of shock, the recognition. That was it. That split second when her mask slipped. Because she knew that bracelet. She'd held it. She'd probably unwrapped it herself. And now it was on my wrist. We all sat down for dinner, a long table, 12 people, candles glowing, glasses clinking. The conversation flowed easily. Michael was charming, as always. Ava laughed at every joke, even the bad ones. And I played my role perfectly calm, composed, even affectionate. At one point, Michael reached for the wine bottle, his hand brushing mine. That's when the light caught my wrist again. He froze. Just a tiny pause. Barely noticeable, but I felt it. He looked down, saw it, blinked like his brain was catching up to his eyes. Then he quickly looked away, forcing a smile, but his hand trembled when he poured the wine. Ava saw it too. Her laughter faltered, and I smiled, sweetly, as if I hadn't noticed a thing. In that moment, I realized I didn't need to scream to be heard. The silence between us said everything. Dinner went on. I asked Ava about her work, complimented her outfit, even laughed at one of her stories. Every word I spoke was a blade wrapped in silk. She avoided looking at my wrist, but she couldn't stop glancing. Every flicker of candlelight reflected off the gold like a taunt, a reminder that I knew, and she knew I knew. Michael barely spoke. He kept his smile plastered, but his eyes had lost their shine. He looked like a man trapped in a burning room, pretending it was warm by choice. When dessert came, some chocolate mousse I barely tasted, I lifted my glass and said softly, "To honesty, may we never take it for granted." It was quiet for a beat too long. Everyone smiled, nodded, clinked glasses. But across the table, Ava's eyes dropped, and Michael's throat tightened. That was enough. No confrontation. No chaos. Just exposure. Silent, elegant, devastating. The ride home was wordless. He didn't ask. I didn't offer. The bracelet glowed faintly under the passing streetlights, like a quiet witness to everything unsaid. When we pulled into the driveway, he exhaled, long, shaky. Then he said, "Lauren, where did you get that bracelet?" I looked at him, calm, unblinking. "You tell me." He swallowed, looked away, ran a hand through his hair. Then he said it, the first honest thing he'd said in months. "It was a mistake." I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said, "it was." And then I got out of the car, closed the door gently, and walked inside, leaving him sitting there, alone with the truth. That night, I didn't just wear her bracelet. I wore his guilt. And when I walked away, I took back every piece of myself he thought he'd stolen. They say when you're betrayed, you lose control. But I didn't lose anything that night. I sat at that dinner table across from my husband and his secret and realized I was the only one holding the steering wheel. The dining room was warm, too warm. Maybe it was the candles. Maybe the tension. I could feel both flickering, one flame after another. The room smelled of rosemary chicken, red wine, and expensive perfume. The sound of laughter moved like waves, rising, crashing, pulling back. But underneath it all, I could hear something else. Silence. Heavy, growing. The kind that doesn't come from quiet, but from what no one dares to say. Michael sat beside me, playing his part. The charming husband. The one with stories that made everyone laugh. His hand rested casually on the table, his wedding band catching the light, his voice smooth, rehearsed. And then there was Ava, sitting diagonally across from us, laughing, smiling, but her eyes never quite steady. Every few minutes, they'd flick to my wrist, and I'd move my hand just slightly, letting the bracelet catch the candlelight again. It was almost hypnotic, a rhythm, a reminder. When you know the truth, you stop needing words. You start reading faces instead. And both of theirs were telling stories they didn't want anyone else to hear. Michael's laugh came half a second late. Ava's jokes were too quick, too bright, two guilty souls trying to fake innocence under crystal chandeliers. And me? I was calm. So calm it scared even me. There's power in silence. It unnerves people. It makes them wonder what you know and how much you're willing to expose. Someone asked how we met. Michael smiled, the way people do when they've told a story 100 times. At a conference, he said. She was presenting a branding pitch. I fell for her mind first. The table laughed softly. I smiled too. But then I added, he's always had a thing for strong women, especially the confident ones. And that was the moment Ava stopped breathing just for a second. Because she knew that I knew. And Michael did too. His hand tightened around his wine glass. A single drop slid down its side and hit the tablecloth. A tiny red stain that spread slowly. Perfect metaphor. Dinner continued. Stories. Laughter. Music from the next room. But under it all tension. Thick as fog. I sat still, watching Ava's fingers fidget with her napkin. Michael kept checking his watch, his phone, his glass, anything but my face. I leaned back in my chair, letting my wrist rest on the table. The bracelet sparkled. It looked almost innocent again. If you didn't know better, you'd think it belonged to me. When the dessert came, I could barely taste it. My focus was on their silence, the kind that screams even when no one talks. I took my time sipping my wine, and when I looked up, Ava was watching me. Her eyes were glassy, almost pleading. It wasn't anger I saw there, it was guilt, and maybe shame. That's when I realized something important. She wasn't evil, she was just weak. She believed his lies the same way I once did. And suddenly, I didn't hate her. I pitied her, because someday she'd be sitting exactly where I was across from him, waiting for another woman to wear her bracelet. I turned to Michael, smiling softly. "Sweetheart," I said, "you didn't tell me your colleague's wife had such beautiful taste in jewelry." Every head at the table turned. Michael froze. Ava's lips parted slightly. The air thickened, everyone sensing something shift, something sharp but invisible. Michael cleared his throat. "What do you mean?" I tilted my wrist toward him. "This bracelet. I found it in your car the other day. Lovely piece, isn't it?" Ava dropped her fork. The sound, small, metallic, echoed like thunder in that silent room. Michael stammered, "Lauren, But I didn't let him finish. I smiled. "Oh, relax, honey. I'm just saying you have great taste. I mean, we do." Then I raised my glass, eyes locked on his. To honesty. May we never take it for granted. The room went still. No one breathed. For a few seconds, the only sound was the faint clinking of ice in someone's glass. Then someone laughed awkwardly, trying to lighten the moment. But the damage was done. The silence that followed was heavy final. Ava excused herself. Michael's hand went to his face. And me? I just sat there, calm, sipping my wine, wearing her bracelet like a crown. Because in that moment, I wasn't the betrayed wife anymore. I was the judge. And that table was the courtroom. People think revenge is about anger, but real revenge is quiet. It's a mirror. You just hold it up and let them see themselves. When we left that night, Michael barely spoke. The drive was tense, headlights cutting through the dark, the air heavy with words we both refused to say. "Halfway home," he whispered. "Lauren, where did you get that bracelet?" I looked out the window, calm. "You tell me," he exhaled shakily. "It was supposed to be." I cut him off. "I know who it was supposed to be for." Silence. No excuses. Just his guilt filling the car like smoke. When we pulled into the driveway, he stayed sitting there, staring ahead. I took off the bracelet, placed it gently in the cup holder, and said, "You left it in your glove compartment once. I thought I'd remind you where it came from." "It's a tryst to not avail it." Then I got out, heels clicking on the pavement, and walked into the house, leaving him behind with the same silence he'd given me. That night, I didn't just wear a bracelet. I wore the truth and made them both see it. And that, I realized, was the loudest thing silence could ever say. People think freedom comes the moment you leave. But real freedom starts the moment you stop explaining yourself. That night, when I closed the door behind me, I didn't cry. The house was too still for tears. It smelled like our life coffee, linen, and the faint trace of his cologne that clung to the hallway. For years, that scent had meant comfort. Now it just smelled like pretending. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window, staring at the city lights. Cars moved below, tiny and distant, everyone going somewhere, work, home, someone else's arms. And I realized every single one of them had no idea that inside this quiet house, a whole world had just ended. But I didn't feel broken. I felt clear, like fog lifting. He came in a few minutes later. No words, just the sound of his shoes on the floor, the slow unbuttoning of guilt. He didn't apologize. He just said, "Lauren, please, let's talk." I turned, leaned against the counter, arms folded. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "You already said everything when you bought that bracelet." He rubbed his face. "It didn't mean anything." I smiled. "It always means something. Maybe not love, but choice always means something." He stood there, quiet, the man who once filled rooms with confidence, now looking small in his own house. And that's when I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. There's a difference. Over the next few weeks, I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I simply withdrew one piece of myself at a time. My laughter, my patience, my presence. I started packing little by little. Files, photos, the books I actually liked. I opened a new bank account, changed my passwords, found a small apartment near Midtown with a view of the skyline and a coffee shop on the corner. It smelled like new beginnings. The day I left, I didn't leave a note. Just the bracelet, laid neatly on his nightstand. No explanation. No, "you hurt me." Just a quiet goodbye wrapped in gold. Some endings don't need closure. They need distance. Moving out felt like learning to breathe again. For the first time in years, I woke up without checking if someone else's schedule dictated my morning. I filled my own fridge, chose my own flowers, and when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the betrayed wife anymore. I saw a woman rebuilding herself, one silent victory at a time. People asked what happened between us. I told them nothing, because sometimes the best revenge is letting them wonder. One evening, months later, I walked past that same jewelry store, the one from the receipt I found. The window display had changed. New pieces, new sparkle. And for the first time, I didn't feel that twist in my chest. Just calm curiosity. I smiled, whispered to my reflection, "You taught me something, Michael. Luxury fades, but dignity doesn't." Then I kept walking. The following week, I was invited to speak at a women's networking event. The topic was authenticity in branding. But when I stood on that stage, looking out at all those faces, what came out of my mouth wasn't about marketing. I said, Sometimes the image we work hardest to protect isn't our brand, it's the illusion of a perfect life. But the moment you stop protecting that illusion, you start living your truth. The room went silent, and I saw at that look of quiet recognition. Dozens of women who had worn their own versions of that bracelet. That night, back home in my new apartment, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine. Atlanta glowed beneath me, soft, golden, alive. And I realized I wasn't bitter. I was awake. The city hummed. My phone buzzed with messages, friends, work, life moving forward. And for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I whispered to myself, "You cheated on a woman who was ready to fight the world for you." But I walked away before I ever had to raise a weapon. I smiled, because sometimes the cleanest revenge is just living beautifully after being underestimated. The bracelet with the wrong initials, that was never my heartbreak. It was my beginning.